To speak a word is to take an action. We don't think about words that way. We think of words as non-actions. Words don't matter. They're just expressions of emotion. They're just expressions of your perspective, your perceptions. And as such, words are these kinds of not really significant, not really meaningful things. I just say these things because I have emotions and I need to express those emotions. And they're not really, these words that I'm saying, they're not doing anything. They're not accomplishing anything. They're just expressions of me. That's all. This morning, our cultural disregard of the power of words is going to have a head-on collision with the truth of God's Word. This may actually be the worst sermon you've ever heard. It may be the meanest, most uncompromising, most legalistic, most off-putting, hurtful thing you have ever heard from a pulpit. So now that I've got your guard up, let's talk about the impact of our words. Here is Proverbs 15:4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. Words are actions. To speak a word is to take an action. And that action is going to have an impact. There are two contrasting impacts in this verse. The first one is that a gentle tongue is a tree of life. You've got an image here of a quilt from the 1800s, early 1800s, that depicts the tree of life. What a beautiful thing. This explosion of color and life, blossoms, and it's unstoppable. It has taken over the entire quilt. And that's what the tree of life does. It just keeps growing, keeps expanding. It keeps producing more life, more energy, more food, more sustenance, more nurture, more nourishment. It just keeps coming. That's the tree of life. It goes back to the Garden of Eden, which has the tree of life at the center of it. You know that garden is going to make a comeback. At the end of Revelation, we're told that garden comes back in the New Jerusalem, and at the center of that garden is the tree of life. And we've got access to it again. This is saying you have access to the tree of life that was in the Garden of Eden and that will be in the New Jerusalem. You've got access to it right now by taking the actions of a gentle tongue. It's a tree of life. It gives nourishment. It takes over. It fills the space of your life. It reaches out. It produces nourishment. It does all of the things that we want life to do. Look with me at some of the verses around this one. This particular verse, 15:4, is surrounded by other observations about the tongue and the impact of the actions we take when we speak. Look at verse 7. The lips of the wise spread knowledge. So when your heart speaks and it comes out of your mouth and your heart fears the Lord, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, your heart has a deep regard for the glory and holiness of God, then what comes out of your mouth, out of that heart, is knowledge. Knowledge of God, how He relates to the world, and how you relate to the world in His will. And so your mouth speaks, and your whole perspective, your whole emotional life comes out of your mouth, and it gives knowledge. What an amazing thing. Notice the contrast, verse 7, lips contrasted with hearts. The lips of the wise spread knowledge, not so the hearts of fools. The hearts of fools are scoffing at God, scoffing at His law, scoffing at His wisdom. And so the fool in his heart has no access to that wisdom, and as a result, what comes out of his mouth or her mouth is folly, ignorance, more scoffing, mockery, death. Look down at verse 23 of chapter 15. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. Isn't it wonderful when somebody says something to you that just fits? It's apt. We think of somebody who has wit, somebody who can put the word in the right place at the right moment. And very often when somebody does that, we laugh because it's a cause of joy. We see something new and with sparkling clarity that we didn't see before, and so we laugh about it. This word joy is it's just about gaiety, mirth. It's a party word. So when someone takes an action and says a word in season and it is right and it fits, we throw a party about that, at least in our hearts. And we maybe laugh. Look at verse 26. The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord. So again, a contrast here. Thoughts, the interior world of a wicked person. The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord. They don't even have to be expressed. They're a stench just sitting in our heads. But, verse 26 again, gracious words are pure. Gracious words can't come from those kind of thoughts. Gracious words can't come from that kind of heart. So the gracious words that come out, they're pure. This is a word that means unmixed. It's unalloyed. A gracious word is an action that comes out of God's grace in your heart. There's no other origin that a gracious word can really have. So here we have this, back to verse 4, a gentle tongue is a tree of life. If you have a tongue that is expressing the things of God, the holiness of God, the grace of God, and expressing it in that sense of submitted, humble fear and awe of God, then you have a tree of life, and it's taking over everything around you, and it's giving nourishment. There's the opposite impact. Back to verse 4 again. Perverseness in it breaks the spirit. So a perverse tongue is crooked. You might put any number of words on this. Abusive, insulting, mocking, angry, whatever word you might want to put here about the impact of such a tongue. The word that Solomon puts on it is crooked, twisted, perverse. Let's think about that. Twisted words. That means that there's something being said, there's something being expressed There's meaning being put on the table, but the words aren't doing it. The words are saying something else. There may be a smile on the face and a threat in the heart. The words might lie. The words might flatter, which is just another way of saying the words might lie. Flattery is lying. As we talked about a number of months ago, the words might seem to make peace, but the heart has a different agenda. The heart is positioning itself for dominance, control, violence. You know what I'm talking about here? I'm talking about the power of the tongue to break the spirit through sheer dishonesty. Dishonesty of intent, dishonesty of agenda, twisted speech. I think if we were to really unpack the most intense grief of our life, it is probably going to be something that somebody said to you that was in this category. You might find yourself saying, I trusted that person, but they said this, or they did this. I believed that person, and I just regret it. I never should have committed myself to the care of that person because they betrayed me. This kind of twistedness is able to burrow its way or drill its way into a person's heart and mind and break them, destroy their hope, destroy their trust, destroy their ability to bounce back. If you think about it, when your trust has been betrayed, your ability to say, things are going to get better, kind of died. And it needed to be brought back, resurrected somehow, because our hope that things will get better depends on the word of the people around us. So, you can take actions right now that give life or that break the spirit. Here's the irony. The perverseness of the tongue not only breaks the spirit of the person who hears the twisted promise or the flattery or whatever it is, it also breaks the speaker. Look with me at chapter 20. Look at verse 20 of chapter 20. If one curses his father or his mother, his lamp will be put out in utter darkness. Think about that. A curse heard from a son or daughter by a father or a mother breaks the spirit. This proverb says, it also breaks the speaker. You take an action that calls down a curse on your father and mother. You are taking an action that will put your lamp out, will snuff it out. The light goes out, and it's darkness in your life. It breaks you. There are lots of ways that we struggle with our parents, but there is this line, a line of cursing that the Scriptures draws. And is basically saying here, you cross that line, you're broken. Now, I should say something here. A lot of Proverbs are warnings. So you kind of have to append to the Proverbs, broken without repentance. If you don't repent, your lamp's going out. If you do repent, we can relight that lamp. Light's going to come back. Maybe a tree of life starts growing in your life again. So you always have to think about a proverb that way. Turn over to Proverbs 22, verse 10. Different sort of consequence for someone who has a perverse tongue. Drive out a scoffer, and strife will go out, and quarreling and abuse will cease. Wow. So there's a perverse tongue, and it's breaking spirits all over the room. But if you drive that person out of the community, out of those relationships, it's amazing what happens. Healing comes back. People can trust each other again, and people can start talking to each other again. And life comes back. Why? Because the killer is gone. The spirit crusher left the building. So a perverse tongue breaks a spirit. It also breaks the speaker. This proverb is saying, if this is you, the scoffer, the one devoted to strife, the one constantly stoking up arguments and quarreling, constantly engaged in quarreling. If there's not a quarrel going on in your life, there's a hole in your heart, and you have to fill it. If you're that person, this is saying it will break you. You will die alone. You will burn bridges. You will be driven out. It's going to happen. One more. Verses 24 and 25. This is a warning about a person given to anger, wrath. So anger constantly expressing itself in actions, maybe of physical violence, but certainly, at the very least, emotional violence expressing itself in words. Here's Proverbs on this. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. So you can take that a couple of different ways. That person that you're partial to, who is given to anger. This proverb is saying, if you take that side, you're going to get entangled in the same snare. You're going to learn that person's ways. I told you this is going to be hard. This is hard stuff. This is the collision of our modern view of words with the truth of God's word, head on. We say, it's just what you're feeling. You got to vent this kind of stuff. And I have the right to express my perspective. And Proverbs hits that and says, actually, you don't. Because your words are actions, and they can kill. They can break a spirit. So, this is very sobering. It drives us back to the heart issues of who are we before God, and how are we to communicate in a way that glorifies Him. I want to give you an example of Proverbs 15:4. A gentle tongue is a tree of life. It nourishes. Versus a perverse tongue that breaks a spirit. So an example of this, and we're going to derive some principles from this example, is found in 1 Samuel chapter 19. 1 Samuel 19. We're looking at King Saul as he starts his descent into madness. A man of perverse tongue, a man who takes vows he doesn't keep, a man who lies, who is increasingly abusive to the people around him, breaking the spirits of the people in his court as he seeks to kill David. And so it's about Saul at this point in his life where he's starting to tip, and this perversity in his heart is starting to take over everything that he does. And it's also a story about his son, Jonathan. Jonathan is basically David in Saul's house. Jonathan is a man of incredible physical courage. He is incredibly skilled on the battlefield. He wins when he goes to war. Jonathan is decisive. Jonathan is a man of his word. He's a man of conviction. Jonathan is a man who knows the Lord and lives for him. He's basically David in Saul's house, which is kind of interesting. Had Saul, with all his faults, only trusted God, his son Jonathan would have been David. Kind of interesting counterfactual thing to think about. When we don't trust God, what comes next? When we do trust God, what comes next? There was a next thing for Saul, and it was in his house, and it would have been part of his line, but it was not to be because of his disobedience and rejection of the Lord. Okay, so you got these three characters: David, Saul, and Jonathan. Saul is watching David succeed on the battlefield enormously and achieving kind of legendary status in Israel. He's going from strength to strength, winning victories over the Philistines, while Saul basically sits in his palace and does nothing. So David is getting bigger, Saul is getting smaller. Saul doesn't like this. He wants to kill David. And so Saul spoke to Jonathan, chapter 19 of 1 Samuel, verse 1, and to all his servants that they should kill David. Go get him. Take him out. He starts to push his inner circle to kill his strongest guy. And Jonathan told David, verse 2, Saul, my father, seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning, stay in a secret place and hide yourself, and I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you, and if I learn anything, I will tell you. I've got your back. I'm going to defend you, and I'm going to try to persuade my father to stop this madness. Now, I just want you to think this through from Jonathan's point of view. The man he's talking to has been anointed king at the command of the Lord instead of Jonathan. Jonathan should be king, but because Saul disobeyed the Lord, David is going to be king instead. And Jonathan knows this. Have you ever been in a position like that where you've lost and lost big? And the Lord has said, this line is going in another direction, and it's not you. Ever been there? This is really tough. So there's that part of whatever Jonathan is experiencing here, he's not going to be king, and he knows it. And he's talking to the man who is going to be king, and he's saying, I will defend you. If he were perverse in his heart, if his words were twisted, what would you expect him to do? You'd expect him to betray David and try to seize the throne that he might see as rightly belonging to him. Well, how does this work out? How does he speak to his father? I'm going to read this whole thing to you. We're going to unpack it, and then I'm going to derive 3 principles from this. Jonathan spoke well, verse 4, of David to Saul his father, and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. And then why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? This is a marvel. It's amazing. This one little speech in the Scriptures. What if you had the mission, go convince Saul not to kill David? What if you were going to do this? How would you go about it? What if, let's change it up. What if Jonathan came to you and said, I've got this mission, I've got to convince my father not to kill David. So here's what I'm planning to say. Don't sin against David because he hasn't sinned against you. What would you tell him? You might say, Jonathan, that's going to tick him off. You know how volatile Saul is. If you tell him in those words not to do this, it is going to make it worse. He is going to get more angry. He's not going to listen to you. You need to calm him down, not inflame him with these words. You might say that to him. So let's just look at how confrontational this is. Jonathan said to Saul, let not the king sin against his servant David. If you do what you're telling us to do, you are sinning. You are transgressing. Don't do it. That's a double whammy. 1, what you're planning to do is sin. And you've come out in the court and said, we're going to do this. I want you to pursue this. You're sinning by doing that. 2, the second blow here is, after having declared yourself for a course of action in your court and pushed for it to happen, you've got to reverse course and back off. It's a double whammy, this thing. Then, not content with that, Jonathan goes even further. David has not sinned against you. Remember what we said about our view of words? Our tendency is to go to Saul's perspective, what Saul perceives as happening. And we want to say, yeah, but from Saul's point of view, David is sinning against him because he's getting bigger than the king. And so, you got to give Saul some credit here. He's got a point. You don't want to make him mad about this, as if Saul's perspective has any merit whatsoever. Saul's perspective is utterly wicked and needs to be confronted. Now, this is the one thing the one thing in our society where we say, oh, wow, that just seems really too harsh. You just can't go there. You can't go to Saul and say, yeah, David, the man you hate, has not done anything wrong to you. You can't say that, because from his perspective, he has. Beloved, the more you chase people's perspectives and try to accommodate where they're coming from, the worse your relationships are going to get. There is a time when you need to say something that is true. Remember that word? What does true mean? It means regardless of what you feel, regardless of your perspective, there's a real world. And you need to join it. That kind of truth. That's what Jonathan is doing here. And when you really look at what he says, it is incredible that he took this risk. He's not even done here. He says, David risked his life for you and for Israel. He won battles. You know where this came from? You know where these victories came from? God. The Lord did this. And he says, you saw it. And I know you saw it because you rejoiced over his victories. They were good for you and good for Israel. And this is what the Lord has done for you. And you know it. So he repeats with a confrontational, rhetorical question, why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? This is tough. So, let's derive some principles from this. In order for us to bless the people around us and become a tree of life, there's something we have to give up. Control. Jonathan walks into this conversation knowing he cannot control his father. There's no way that he can maneuver his father into doing the right thing. There's no way he can guilt manipulate him. There's no way that he can play on his emotions. There's no way that he can try to gaslight him into doing the right thing. There's none of that here. He has surrendered control. And so he is sticking to clear statements of reality, statements of fact, not statements of emotion. I just want you to notice, he doesn't even call him father. He calls him the king. You're the king of this nation. You are in charge of justice. You are the office holder here. And you will be doing wrong if you pursue this. He doesn't even call him father. You might expect him at least to say, hey, I'm your son. I'm on your side. I have felt the same things that you feel. I wanted this kingdom to succeed. You might expect him to say things like this. Jonathan has a clarity of vision about what he can achieve here. He cannot control his father. So he goes in and he says, here's where it is, Your Majesty. This is reality. And I need you to answer the question, why would you commit murder in this way? Now, it happens that, verse 6, Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan, and Saul took an oath, "As the Lord lives, David shall not be put to death." That would be another vow that he did not keep, because even a couple paragraphs later, after there's a reconciliation and Saul brings him back into the court, he tries to throw a spear at him, tries to pin David to the wall. So Jonathan is not in this playing a game with Saul to try to control him. He's saying, the Lord is the one who steers you, not me. My job is to confront you with what's real. And if you can come into the real world with us and recognize what's going on here and see the goodness of the Lord, then life is going to flourish in our kingdom. This is so good. Jonathan is calm. Because he recognizes that he cannot control Saul, he not only doesn't try to emotionally manipulate Saul, he also withholds that emotional energy that might lead him to revile Saul. What if Jonathan told Saul what he really thought about the man who had flagrantly disobeyed God not once but multiple times, and who had lost his kingdom and his lineage because of it? In other words, Jonathan's life, his future, was ruined by Saul. What if he kind of got in that vein in this conversation? Would he be right? Yeah, he'd be right. He'd be saying true things, but it's the wrong energy. So he doesn't say any of that. He withholds that. He keeps himself in the realm of facts, things that are true in the real world. And he doesn't, so he wants Saul to join that world, and he himself steps into that world out of his own perceptions, his own perspective, his own feelings. This is powerful. It creates a setting of calm. I want you to notice where he does this. Does he do it in court with all of the other courtiers around? Does he call his father out in a public situation? No. He goes into a field in private and says, "Your Majesty, come back to the real world. Join us here." But he doesn't do it in public. He doesn't revile him. He doesn't air his own grievances. He is calm. And why is he calm? Because Jonathan knows, if you read 1 Samuel, Jonathan has experienced that God has his back. God will be faithful to his words. God will be faithful to David. Jonathan's job is to do what he can in this situation, not try to take over God's work. So he's calm. Finally, he is candid. Where do these gracious, pure words come from? They come from hearts that refuse to hide. Hearts that refuse to say, "I'm going to talk to you in code, and I'm going to hope that you get it, but my real message is back here. Because if I told you what I really think, you would just blow up. And so I need to control you. I need to control the situation. So I'm just going to kind of broadcast in code what I'm thinking and hope that you get the message. Then I can say to everybody, yeah, I told him. But in fact, in the real world, I didn't tell him anything. I just spoke in code. This is an abdication of responsibility, and really what the wisdom of God, not only in the matter of words, but in all of life, what it is saying is, you are responsible for your life. You are responsible for your relationships. You're responsible for your feelings. Take up your responsibility. You have agency. You can choose. And your choices will be stronger and stronger and stronger the more you trust God. So this is saying, and Jonathan is modeling for us here, be candid. Use straight talk. Don't speak in code. I would just tell you that if you strive to learn what Jonathan is doing here, it'll change your life. It will change over time how you feel, because you won't have this burden of trying to construct a code that other people can decode and receive your message. Instead, you will simply say what you mean and take responsibility for it. And yes, what's going to result from that? Arguments, difficulty, conflict. Might last for days, might last for weeks. You know, some of these arguments, these disagreements, they might go on for years. Can you trust God for years of disagreement and difficulty? By saying what you mean, going just as far as you need to go, and not going too far. And when you do go too far, you know what you say? Here's what works for me. I'm sorry. I went too far. I should not have said that, but I did. So what I need to say instead is this. Say that. We can mean that with just as much clarity as we mean everything else that we say. So what we have modeled for us here is yielding of control to God, the calm that results from that. And then the gentle tongue speaks out of that calm. And in Jonathan's case, one of the most inflammatory moments in anyone's life, it creates a blessing for his father. Would that Saul had held to this. By the next chapter, he's chucking a spear at Jonathan. It doesn't work all the time. It doesn't control people. But it does put you in the will of God. It does put you under the shadow of his protection, his wings. That's what it does. And he brings all these things out the way he wants them to come out. So let me ask you two questions, basically just repeating what we've already talked about. What are you trying to control? What are you trying to make people do around you? What do you want from them? It's possible that if you said clearly and fairly what you want, that there could be a meeting of the minds and the real world could become a place of life. But as long as you withhold the truth, and as long as you guard that behind a code that it's other people's responsibility to break so they can understand you, as long as you do that, death results from this every day. So what are you trying to control? What is that thing? Maybe you realize, I'm trying to control things in a way that is absolutely wrong, and I need to stop doing that. Maybe that's the realization. Or maybe you're saying, what I'm trying to control here is right, but I'm trying to do this in the wrong way, and I need to change what I'm doing, how I'm relating to the people around me. Second question, do your words hide your meaning? Do you say things where the words are not communicating the actual message? The words are actually disguising it? It's a smile mask on your face and a knife in your hand. Do your words hide your meaning? How do they do that? I believe firmly, clearly, from experience, that if we ask these questions, it will save our lives. It will save our families. It will save our marriages. It will save our churches. It could save our community. Because words are actions. Words have impact. They are not mere expressions of our sentiments.